Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Alright, so this is the beginning of the unit on colonization up to early colonization, basically how Europe came over to what is present day America, set up colonies, and how those colonies developed. That is what this whole unit on today's lesson is really just going to be about the discovery of what is present day America by Europeans. Alright, so let me make myself a little smaller here. Put myself up here in the corner. Boop, 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 boop. All right. So before we can start talking about all the ways that Europe changed America, let's talk about what America, and when I say America, I'm talking about like our current geographic region that is America. I will constantly call that America because it's easiest for you to understand. But at the time, it wasn't its own country. It was a whole bunch of different small civilizations that lived there and a whole bunch of, as they would call it, like mini countries. So it is not fair to say in any stretch of the imagination that this land was empty when Europeans showed up. Let's dispel that myth. First thing in this course, let's dispel it. There were 7 million Native Americans, as we call them now. We'll talk about today where that name came from. 7 million Native Americans that lived here. Within 200 years of Europeans showing up, there's less than 2 million. All right? Absolute annihilation of an entire culture and race of people. Purposely and non-purposefully. Absolutely horrific. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. It's not like all the Europeans are showing up to an empty territory. Because the Europeans did not value the people that already lived here, they a lot of times wrote as if it was empty land because they didn't view the people of having any rights to the land since they didn't value them as humans. So that is where that myth comes from, that this was empty land. It was very, very much populated. Got a map here to show you. All right. So this map here shows you all the different native tribes that lived in what is present day America when it was discovered by Europeans. All right. So it is important to point out that while we start talking about the Europeans coming over and this blank canvas that they have in order to create what is present day America, you have to keep in mind at all times that this was not a blank canvas, and every time they created colonies, it negatively affected another civilization. All right. So the difference is a lot of the Europeans when they came over, there's just a few different languages. You had the Spanish that was spoken by Spain, kind of the first group over here. You're going to have English that's spoken by the English in England when they come over here. And then when Canada comes over and the French come over, when the French come over to Canada, they speak French. So there's really three languages. There's like 140 to 160 different tribes, and on this map, we're basically just showing you the biggest of the tribes. They had tons of different languages and different offsets of their languages. So they didn't have a single language, like no one language. Over here, they grew a bunch of stuff that Europe had never seen before, like corn. All right, potatoes, lima beans. There's a lot of stuff that grew over here that could grow enough food for large populations that people in Europe had never seen before. Some natives lived a nomadic lifestyle, like they'll say the Sioux Indians here in the middle of the plains. Tons of buffalo, and we'll start talking about them actually at the end of this course, specifically the stories going along with the buffalo and the Great Plains Indians. But these were more nomadic Indians that would wander and follow food every day. All right. Because that was the climate. The climate here was not susceptible to growing a lot of food because the rainfall is really inconsistent for the Native Americans at the time. So more in the middle of the country, you're going to have more of a nomadic lifestyle where the natives will pack up and move on a daily basis following the food supply, which is the buffalo. They're not like foraging for berries caveman style. They know exactly where their food was, is these herds of millions of buffalo, and they just follow the buffalo, and they'd live like that for thousands of years. Over here on the East Coast, all right, you're going to have a very different style of Native Americans, as they were very much farmers, and they would do hunting for deer and things like that. So they would have more permanent towns and live in log cabins, they would call them long houses. We would view them as like log cabins. So they lived a more traditional style of what the Europeans are used to, but still it's enough difference that you can look down on them if you were the Europeans when you came in. So because the Native Americans over here on the East Coast, and these are going to be the first group that the Europeans are going to interact with when they get into present day America, they're much more peaceful. Now, there's going to be a bunch of drama, tons of drama between the Native Americans and the Europeans, and there's, if you want to say good guy and bad guy, it's hard to say who's the good guy and bad guy. But at the end of the day, the pendulum's going to swing a lot more towards the Europeans because they didn't value the natives as humans at all. And it's going to cause the natives to do the same to the Europeans. Anywho, so when you're in a permanent location and you have neighbors, when you have a house, right, and you can't just run away every time you have a problem, you have better negotiating skills with your enemies and the people that you dislike. You're not just always trying to murder them because you still have to live there at the end. So the natives on the East Coast here, due to the geography, right, over here, better growing areas, very much changes their culture. So they're more willing to work with the Native Americans or more willing to work with the Europeans when they show up. The Europeans will take advantage of that and effectively take all their land from the Native Americans eventually. Whereas later on, when you get more to the center of the country, later on in U.S. history as I'm talking, these Native Americans are going to be much more aggressive because they're not used to having to compromise and negotiate with hostile people because they'll either attack them or they'll just go in another location. So depending on your geographic location, right, depends on how you handle foreigners. Also, it's going to matter pretty strongly over what your climate is like. If you get consistent rainfall, like in this area, you can grow stuff, makes you farmer, makes you more functioning to negotiate with foreigners and compromise, I should say, as opposed to negotiate, you're compromising. In the center of the country, that's not as much of a thing because of the climate, keeps from growing. So they're much more nomadic, so they're constantly used to moving and not in a permanent location. So climate makes a big difference off of how Native Americans interact with foreign groups, and a lot of that deals with the climate and the geography. So, like right here, here's the question that you'll answer. You need to answer these in complete sentences, in 2 complete sentences, all right? So the question here is, why were the tribes of Indians different from each other based on their geography? You just answer that in 2 complete sentences, as we've just sit there and talked about with the rainfall, changes their culture, changes how they get food, changes, what their mentality is towards foreigners. So this is how all these different Indian tribes, based on their geography, where they live at, really changes how they interact with other people and changes their own culture. So answer those in 2 complete sentences as we've talked. So I'll put the question here as we go through. A lot of times I'm not going to stop on the question, all right? I'll put the question here basically to make sure I see it as we go through, to make sure that I have answered it completely. If you get to a question and you haven't answered and I'm getting ready to move on, since it's a video, feel free to pause me. Please do, all right? So you're going to answer these in 2 complete sentences. You can always rewind, go back, and see what we talked about. So answer these as we go through them. All right. Oh, well, I got a little. Where's my? Hey, little ship showed up. That animation doesn't work with the different versions of PowerPoint. All right. So, European exploration. In the 1400s, explorers began to sail around the world. Oh, Christopher Columbus. All right. Let me tell you the story of Christopher Columbus. Let's see if this works here. Click on this. All right. Boop. 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 All right. So this here is the world. All right. And I'll move myself down here. So this here is the world. We're going to start today. There's a guy here. Let's come in here. Here in Italy, all right. This is where this guy Christopher Columbus is from. He's Italian, all right. And he's an explorer. Now, the story with Christopher Columbus is the idea that he was the first guy that's like, I'm pretty sure the world is round. He's not. Most smart people for a long, I mean, since Galileo understood the earth was round. It is shocking to me that that is now a debate in modern society with people that want to argue whatever. Flat earthers frustrate me. Can't use logic against the logic. All right. So he's here in Italy. All right. Italy's not a super strong country. The most powerful country at the time here in Europe is Spain. All right. So Spain has the Spanish Armada, the most massive navy on earth. Just absolutely enormous navy. All right. So nobody wants to mess with Spain, rightfully so, because if you sell out here and Spain decides to sink you, they're going to sink you. Now, Christopher Columbus, who is in Italy, all right, he believes that he can find a quicker route to get to India. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about here. There's a country right here called India. Has a whole bunch of spices, all right? Now, spices are incredibly important. Yes, there's a lot that make the food taste better, really change the bland food. Also, spices like salt. Salt is a very important spice. The reason salt is so important is because it preserves food. They didn't have refrigerators back then, so if you had meat, it would go bad. Like if you kill a deer and there's a family of 4, that deer is going to go bad long before you can eat it all. But if you cover it in salt, all right, you can preserve it much longer and it won't go bad. So salt is very important for meat storage. All right, so everybody needs salt, and India has a ton of it. So if you're like a salt merchant, you make bank. All right. However, if you're like Christopher Columbus or any of these other people, and now he's an explorer, but if you're just a merchant, I guess, in Europe at the time, here's how you would have to get to India. There is no way of cutting through here as it would look like at the time. There is today, but not then. They would have to go from Europe all the way around Africa. All right. All the way around Africa, around the tip of South Africa, and all the past Madagascar, way of all the animals, all the way up here to India. All right. Get all your spices and then go all the way back around, and it took forever. Now, you do this on a ship and not by land, even though land would be closer, because ships can carry a whole lot more than wagons can, and it's a lot more dangerous and stuff like that going around here. So this is what everybody had to do to get spices. Christopher Columbus believes that the earth is nowhere near as big around as it is. He thinks, all right, if he just sails out here and just goes out this way, out into the middle of nowhere, all right, people thought this might be the end of the world. They didn't know what was out here. That if he just came out here, that since the world is round, if he just comes out here, he's going to run into India. So he knows India. So if he goes down in this direction and then cuts straight across, he is going to run into India. So let me show you on this globe what he thinks exists and what doesn't exist. All of this stuff he doesn't think exists. Not only that, he thinks the earth is a lot smaller. So he thinks he's going to run into India around in here. So he thinks like where America is like where China and stuff is, and that India will be down here. Nobody has from Europe has attempted that. So he thinks if he comes this way, he's going to end up, look at all this stuff he has no idea exists, like the Pacific Ocean. He thinks the Atlantic and the Pacific are the same ocean. You can come over here. Now, I'm not really sure what his logic is, because surely they know about the Philippines and Indonesia and all this. I don't know how he thinks he's going to make it through all of here and then end up in India, because that's what he's going to think. But he thinks he can come across here and hit the India, and it's actually going to be shorter to do that, to go all the way that way, as opposed to just going around Africa and up here to India. All right. So he has his game plan. He is convinced of it. So he goes and asks Italy, hey, fund me to go do this. And they're like, no, we're not sending you out there to die in the middle of nowhere. All right. So he goes to Spain. So he's Italian, but he goes to Spain and asks Spain, hey, send me out here. Now, Spain, they're like, no, you're just going to die. But Spain's really rich and they're really powerful. And they're like, well, I mean, if he's willing to go out there and die, right? We'll fund you to go out there and die, and we're like, we'll pay you when you get back, kind of thing, you know, like we'll get you set up, but all your payments really going to happen when you get back because they think this guy's not coming back. Spain's so powerful in the Navy. If there's a 1% chance this would work, Spain wants to, Spain wants to control this route. So that's why Spain agrees to send Christopher Columbus out here. Now, Christopher Columbus is a turd for a whole bunch of different reasons. He's not a very likable guy. He's not a good guy. But just want to put that out there. So don't feel bad when I get ready to make fun of him because it's worth it. So Christopher Columbus is going to sail from Spain and go to India. He's going to set off and he's going to come across the ocean. All right. And I got another map here. Let me get rid of this. Hopefully this doesn't. All right. Let me put myself back up here in the corner. He leaves Spain, all right, and goes all the way over here, all right, going across the Atlantic Ocean. When he gets here, he's expecting to start hitting India, and they run out of food, all right. There's real close to a mutiny on the ships, but he's past the point of no return. Means they can't go back because they don't have enough food to make it back. A lot of tension, and all of a sudden he sees land. Now, Christopher Columbus has never been to India. All he knows about it, that's right, think about that. He's like, wait a minute, all I know is they're brown and they don't speak my language, right? They don't speak Spanish, they don't speak Italian, they don't speak English, they speak a different language, right? So he shows up over here in the Caribbean. He sees land. He gets off the land. He's like, oh my gosh, did we find it? All of a sudden there's people that show up and they're brown people. And they don't speak any language that he knows. And they have spices. So guess what? He takes the spices, pays them whatever, gets back on the ship, comes back to Spain, and is like, I did it! I did it! Spain's like, you did what? He's like, I went out there to India, got stuff from the Indians, and came back. He has no idea that he did not go to India. That is why Native Americans in America, or this whole 2 continents, are called Indians. Because Christopher Columbus called them Indians because he thinks he's in India. Comes all the way back. Now, he did bring spices back. And they're like, this ain't legit. He's like, it is. I can do it again. And they're like, all right, double or nothing. Do it again. It's like, fine. Christopher Columbus gets back on a ship, sails back across, goes to another island, gets more spices, comes back to Spain, told you, and everybody's mind is blown. And like he's like, I found a way to India, I found a way to India. So everybody believes now that he has found something out here, but everybody else that can do the math of how big the earth is, they're like, there's no way he made it to India. He's 100% convinced he made it to India. He dies a couple years later, 100% convinced he found a new route to India. At no point does Christopher Columbus ever realize what he actually discovered is a new route to these 2 continents. So after he dies, all right, then other explorers are like, let me see that map. And they come out after him and come over here and start mapping this area. And that's when everybody's like, oh my gosh, look what we just discovered. All right. So they didn't invent it. They discovered it as far as for Europe. There's millions of people that already live here that are Native Americans, fully functioning societies. They don't need any help, no intervention. They're cool with the way things have been going for thousands of years. Extremely advanced civilizations over here by really anybody else's criteria with the Aztecs and the Incas here in South America. I'll throw this little picture up here of people like, oh, everybody thought he was going to sail off the end of the world. Only morons thought that. Just like today. Same type of people who believe, people that believe the earth is flat, I wouldn't say are morons as in they can't comprehend it, but there is like this massive issue in society with people believing in random conspiracy theories. Anyway, I could go off on that, but I'm not going to. Earth is not flat. Earth is not flat. You're not going to sail off the edge of it. There's no ice wall. Game of Thrones style. None of that. All right. So why did Christopher Columbus call the Native Americans Indians when he landed in North America? We had talked about that. in detail. All right. So this launches what's called the Age of Discovery. All right. Lots of need for new markets and resources. Religious upheaval in Europe. So there's this thing called the Protestant Reformation. Not sure. Hopefully this registers with you from world history, from whenever that was. If you had me, we talked about it in detail. So to simplify, everybody in Europe, I say everybody, speaking in broad terms, 90+% of the people in Europe are Christian. All right. The problem with the Christians in Europe is they've started to infight for a couple hundred years now. So it used to be if you're a Christian, everybody was Catholic. Well, then some people didn't like the way the Catholic Church was doing things, but they still wanted to be Christian. So they broke off and made their own versions of churches. You have Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterians, just anything that is Christian that's not Catholic is called Protestant. Europe starts trying to dictate what church people can go to, their own version of the church, whether it's Catholic or the Church of England or something like that. Really what you just need to understand for this course is that a lot of people wanted to be Christian a certain way in Europe, and it wasn't allowed. And people felt very strongly that they wanted to be allowed to worship a certain way. One of the things that the New World is going to allow for people to do is if they decide to leave Europe and come over to the New World, they're allowed to worship however they want. So that is a big carrot dangling in front of a lot of people that we'll start talking about this unit in coming over here. So the Protestant Reformation, basically reforming Protestant. Protestant means you're protesting the Catholic Church. This type of stuff is the situation in which is going to motivate people to come over here. But that's specifically talking about England that we will get to. The very first people that are going to come over, not surprisingly, are going to be the Spanish. All right. The Spanish are going to come over because, again, Spain, most powerful navy on earth with the Spanish Armada. Nobody wants to tick off Spain because you don't want to get in a naval battle with them. All right. So Spain gets first dibs. When Spain shows up, their first groups are really going to be their military because they're going to come over and see what cool stuff they can just take from the existing civilizations that are over here. But on a larger scale here, and this basically spans the rest of colonization, once they discover these two continents, North and South America, there are, with rare exception, all right, there are 3 reasons why people would come over here. 3, all right? And they're called the 3 G's. God, gold, and glory. God means religious freedom, all right? And you're going to see a lot of that when we start talking about the Puritans and the Pilgrims and the Separatists and things like that that are going to be coming over to what is present-day America near Boston and the Massachusetts Bay Colony. So that's what God is people coming here for religious freedom, all right, to worship the way they want. So people are coming over for God. There's one of the G's, God. Next one is gold. Gold is crazy expensive. Everybody wants it. There's this whole new world that they have a bunch of gold. And actually down in what is present-day Mexico and South America, they realize there's these civilizations called the Aztecs and Incas that actually have a good bit of gold. And the Spaniards, their eyes get really big. They want it. They want to come take the gold that's over here in the New World and take it back to Spain and spend it. So that's so it's either people coming over here because they want to worship how they want. They want to come over here to get rich. So gold kind of means rich. There's other ways of getting rich. We'll talk about tobacco in future lessons. And then glory. This is like Christopher Columbus. He wanted to be the first guy. He wanted to be famous. He wanted the glory of having to do this. You're going to see Sir Walter Raleigh, as we'll talk about, who funds a whole bunch of, or puts a whole bunch of money together to try to fund these colonies. He's the type of guy whose motivation is glory of wanting to have his name out there. So these are the three G's: gold, God, God, gold, and glory are the 3 main reasons why people would be coming over here at the time. So the question here is, what are the 3 G's and what is an example of what each means? So make sure you answer these in complete sentences. So you should be answering these as we go through. 2 screens is great if you have it, or you make me small, or the video small, and your worksheet on the side of it as you answer it. Make sure you answer these. If I'm just going to make sure when I see these that I've discussed them and moving on. If you don't have it, again, I'm a video. Pause me and then go through and answer these. All right. Impact of Columbus. So Columbus absolutely, fundamentally is going to change the world. He's going to be dead before he realizes it. But because he figured out and was the first guy to come across, it opens up trade between North and South America and Europe. The North and South America is referred to as the New World. Tons of things are going to start changing. You're going to have what's called the Columbian Exchange. All these people are going to start coming over here and trading and shipping that stuff back to England. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to show up in the New World that had never existed in the New World before. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to show up in Europe that has never existed in Europe before. So today we've really just talked about mainly the Spanish coming in. We'll talk about the English and the French and all that here in later lessons. This is very important, though. I'm going to point this out. So this is the millions of individuals. Let me get myself up here out of the corner. All right. You notice the Indian people come straight down. I mean, it is from 1600 to 1800 that you go from 7 million people to less than 2 million people while the colonists show up. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. There's war, there's stuff like that, but there's a lot of disease. Disease is just devastating for the Native Americans. Even once the Europeans realize the disease is devastating to Native Americans, instead of being like, oh, we don't want to infect you, they start, in certain situations, purposely infecting them with stuff like smallpox in order to eradicate an entire race of people. There's no way you can explain this without acknowledging that it was a genocide of an entire race of people. So as the population is going to grow, as you can see, these green lines, the total population is going to start showing up. The actual population of the Native Americans is just going to get destroyed over really the course of this course. We'll talk more and more about how the Native American population just gets pushed aside and just annihilated. All right, so these are some of the things that went from, like, with the Columbian Exchange is what it's called, where the two sides interact with each other, named after Columbus, who basically found this trade route. So this is stuff that goes from Europe to the New World that had never existed. A lot of diseases. Smallpox, measles, chickenpox, malaria, yellow fever, the flu, the cold, all right? All of that goes from Europe over to the New World, and Native Americans had never had to deal with these things before. Syphilis goes from the sexually transmitted disease, goes from the New World, which was, I wouldn't say common, but it existed among Native American populations, over to Europe. Animals. These are animals that never existed. So Native Americans had never seen horses, cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, or chickens. Had never seen those, much less eaten them. So, and then Europe had never seen turkeys, llamas, alpacas, and guinea pigs. There's just so many crazy things that exist. So there are positive and negative outcomes of it. You have diseases, but you also have new stuff like, think about this. Where am I at? All right, so chocolate, the plant of chocolate comes from North America, all right? However, sugar comes from Europe. Prior to Christopher Columbus, nobody had ever had chocolate. Now, they had cocoa, but having chocolate mixed with sugar is how we eat it didn't exist until a few hundred years ago. Imagine life without chocolate. It's crazy. All right, there's another really interesting story that's worth telling here, and it's really neat, and you'll like this. So tomatoes. Tomatoes are from the New World and go over to Europe. However, if you've ever seen I don't know, shows or movies or cartoons, or somebody's up on stage and they're doing bad and people start throwing tomatoes at them from the audience. All right. So where that comes from is back in this time period. The poor people, and it's really messed up, the poor people in Europe thought that the tomatoes were poison. So when they would throw them at people, all right, it was like trying to throw poison at them. All right. Now, here's why they thought it was poison. And they thought it was only designed to kill poor people. Because rich people would eat tomatoes all the time in Europe and nothing bad ever happened to them. However, when poor people tried to eat tomatoes over in Europe, they would get sick and they would die horrible deaths. It seemed like, and it was not uncommon. And they're like, oh my gosh. So everybody started believing that tomatoes were poison. What was actually happening is that people were using these really low-grade metal plates that were made out of iron. If you were poor, that's what you ate off of. The acidity that is in a tomato, when they would slice it up and put it on that iron plate, it would absorb the iron and the really bad stuff you don't want in your body into the tomato. And then they would eat the tomato, and they were actually getting sick from their plates, all right? Not the actual tomato. And rich people wouldn't use those poor people plates, so they weren't getting sick like that. But it took them a while to figure out why people were dying after eating tomatoes. But that for a long time in Europe, tomatoes were thought to be poison because that was happening. And so this is a really interesting amount of animals and things that showed up in Europe, from Europe into the New World. When people show up on horses, riding horses blows the minds of the Native Americans down here. I mean, there's no other animal. Just think about, like, there's no other animal you can ride. Like, and it's cool with it. Like, you can go grab an ostrich, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what animals you can grab, but they're not cool with it. All right. A horse is. So it just blew the minds of the natives. And the horse itself, once it comes over into the New World, becomes so popular over here that it really spreads and is going to change a lot of the lives of the Native Americans, the Great Plains Indians that follow the buffalo. It will fundamentally change a lot of their life. All right. So what were some of the positive and negative outcomes of the Columbus Exchange? We had talked about that. Go through, answer that in complete sentences. And that's the end of this lesson today, the first lesson in this unit. And I will see you guys again tomorrow.